In this video, I'm going to walk you through some visualizations you can do. In other words, graphing in R. And we're going to use this bank churners data set. So this is a data set with credit card usage. So if we look over here at the data, we see we have age of customers, gender, how many kids they have, their education, like things about them. And then, or on the other side of the data set, we have things about their usage of the credit. So average utilization ratio is how much on average they're using their credit card, their credit limit they have, things like that. So we're going to use this to do some visualizations of the data. We've already had ggplot2. This is the primary workhorse of plotting in R. There are two new packages we're going to use. GIFSKI creates an animated output. ggAnimate also is the thing that creates all the files for that. And so I read in the data set. Let's start with some things that we already know, and I'm going to expand on a ggplot histogram that we used before. So we have here the setup for the data, and I put some notes in here for you. We're going to create a plot using this data, and the AES is the standard choices for the plots. And then that's first to tell it what data we're going to use. Then we can put in the plot that we're going to use, or sometimes we have multiple plots. Here I'm creating a histogram. These are some options that we used before for the histogram, so you can alter the color and the color of the lines and the fill of the inside the boxes of the histogram. The classic, there are many different themes we can use. They set global options in the graphing software. We used the labels one before, and then I'm just going to, throughout this, add a few more options that you might put in here. There are lots of things you can do to adjust the graphing. Here I'm going to create a vertical line. This is the function for vertical line, and one of the inputs to that is saying where does that line cross the x-axis. That's what's called the x-intercept, and I'm going to have it at the mean of the customer age. So then I'm going to color that line blue. So all of these things, you don't have to memorize what they are, but it helps to know that there are those options possible. And then you go look up to see how to do them. So for example, I've left these websites here that are really helpful. So let's look at the cheat sheet website. This is the one that has lots of different cheat sheets on it. We've talked about some of them before. This ggplot2 cheat sheet is really helpful. So you look in here, it tells you all these things that are options that you can use. And if you've used them before, this is easy to follow. If you haven't used them before, maybe it's not. So then there is this graph gallery, that's the other link. And it gives you lots of visual things to look through. So I want to do one of these plots. You can follow the link and walk through the plotting. Let's say we're going to do a scatter plot. I click on that, and it's going to tell me a little bit about the options here. So it says this is let's say I want to do this scatter plot. Click on that, and then it'll tell me about it and give me an example. So you can do that with any of these plots, and there are tons of different plot options. I'm just going to cover some of the basic ones. If you're really interested, you can go through other plots here. You notice there are just lots of different types. And sometimes a cool plot goes a long way. Okay, so let's do this first one, this histogram. And notice I've put in the title, the X and the Y axis, the line here. What does this tell us about the data set? Well, it says the credit card holders are somewhere from the 20-year-olds, 20-something-year-olds up to 70-something-year-olds. And most of our data set is people sort of in their mid-working life, so mid-30s to mid-50s. So this gives us an idea of the distribution of the data set. And then I'm just going to go through some other different types of plots and try and learn more about the data as we go through. So there are some XY plots. This one is going to be a scatter plot. The same thing as above. We have the data set, the basic inputs to the data. The x-axis, I'm going to use credit limit. So this is the limit on their credit card. Average utilization ratio is how much of the on average they're using their credit by purchasing things on the credit card. Then Geompoint, this is the function for scatter plot. So it's going to put a bunch of dots in there. We can choose the size of those dots. So smaller will make, if we have lots and lots of data, making it smaller will make it more, each plot identifiable a little bit better. If it's larger, then it's going to take up more space. Here's another type of theme, and then these other parts are just the same. And we look here, and what does it tell us? Well, as the really high credit limits, on average, the customers use much less of their total credit limit. Those that have low credit limits tend to use all of or most of, or there are lots that use a good part of their credit limit. So these ones right here, the bulk of the distribution, note it's a little darker in this part of the graph. And these ones have low credit limits and use a lot of their credit available. So sort of this sort of interesting shape. We don't have those that have higher and higher credit limits actually using a large amount of those credit limits. Then let's try a couple of other things. So if we add groups to the plots that we're using, so then it will change features of the plot by each group. So here I'm giving you several different things you could try. Of course, you don't need to use all of them. You could use one, and there are some other options as well. But this is in our AES statement. Alpha says how transparent we make the plot point. Color is the color of the plot point, and shape is the shape that it puts in. And we're going to vary that by card category. Here, card category is the type of card. So they have some sort of entry cards, and then some, you get these advertisements that tell you, well, apply for our higher, more prestigious card or something. That's what these are doing. So we can plot that. And notice we did all of these options. So these card categories, this is the legend over here. It's lighter, so this is the alpha part of the code. More transparent on the blue one, least transparent on the silver one. It changes the shape for each of the types of the card category and the color as well. So what do we learn here? Well, mostly down here are the blue card. So the top category here, the blue card have the lowest credit limits on average, at least a big part of their data, and use up a lot of their credit limit. But there are some blue cards that end up way out here that end up having really high credit limits as well. The gold, there aren't that many, so we see a few scattered throughout here, here, here. Not sure why it is that we don't have very many of the gold, but they're in here a little bit. The platinum, same thing, we just got a few of those. The silver, which I'm guessing, ends up here, that is maybe blue, then silver, gold, platinum. So silver, we have a little more of those, and their lower credit limit levels start larger than the blue credit limit levels. So maybe what we have going is the lowest credit limit type cards have the most. Then as we get higher and higher, there are fewer and fewer of those in our customer group. Let's try a different one. We're going to do a line plot. I'm only going to look at the silver cards because this line plot is messy. So I want to make it at least somewhat usable here. So filter, only keeping the card category that is silver. And the same sort of plot here. The difference here is the line, so I'm doing Geom line as a line plot, and I changed the size of a line plot to be, notice up here it was 1, up here it was 0.25, so I just changed it again. So notice it's not a smooth line. That's because we have lots of data in each of these spots, so it's a little messy. This is how many transactions they've had on the credit card, and this is the total dollar value of all of their transactions. So those that have had lots of transactions, of course, we should expect an upward sloping line. If they've had more transactions, they should have more money that they've spent on the card. And that seems to be the case, although it isn't a straight line. So down here we have, as you increase from no transactions to slightly more, it increases just a little bit, but all the way up to 50 transactions, the balance is increasing very slowly. So if you've had a small number of transactions, perhaps you're only using the credit card for small purchases. Then as we get to more transactions, it seems to increase a little more quickly. And then once we get to about, let's say 75, the slope increases a lot. But then past that, it stays fairly level. So there is some number of transactions does increase the total amount, but the types of things that are being purchased, the size of each of those transactions seems to change as you go increase the number of transactions. Then we can do this, let's do it by gender, because that's what we have in the data set. So the couple of things that I changed here, line type, so we had color and alpha before. Line type is a new one when you have a line. And it looks sort of the same, but I just wanted to show you an option for that. So male is the turquoise line, and it's all over the place, but still increases as we move along. Female increases as we move along. Not much difference there. Let's try a few other things. So this is, again, a scatter plot, making the size smaller. I'm going to plot the education level on the x-axis and the income level on the y-axis. Let me show you something that happens here. So if we just do this part, we've got something at every point. So these are both categorical variables, and so they just have a discrete meaning. We don't have, for example, it's not numeric. It goes, it says less than 40,000. Notice that's not in line. Then 60,000. Then we get 40 to 60 here. So it's not in any order. That's because it doesn't know how to sort this. And then we have different education levels. Well, you see these individual points all along here. What we have is that they're all getting plotted at that single point, so we can't see the rest of the data. There's more there, but we can't see it. So we can do this jitter here. What jitter does is just move them all so they're not plotted right on top of each other. They'll still be in the same area, but it's going to push them to not all be plotted on top of each other. And we get a little more information here. So what do we have? Well, where the most dots are those that are making less than $40,000 in the data set, and they are graduates. I'm guessing this is high school graduate. So if they graduated from high school and they had less than $40,000 in income, this is most of our data set, which would be consistent with having a low credit limit and being in that blue card category. So this is a large part of our data set. Then we have others with education levels that are in this group too as well, that are making less than $40,000 a year. Of course, this data is a little bit old, so it is who knows what it would be if it was this year. And we have some, so the highest income category, 120,000 or more. The most, again, are those that are high school graduates, but we have a few at different levels as well. What about if we just look at If you graduated from college, well, if you graduated from college, you still have, most are in the less than $40,000. We've got some of the rest spread out as well. Same thing with any other education level. All right, just gives us a little more idea about what's in the data. Then I want to show one other one that I think is just fun to try. So I'm going to do a histogram here. We're going to use two new packages here, GIFSKI and ggAnimate. ggAnimate is in this part here. It's just part of ggplot. It extends it into doing animated plots. And so I'll show you where that changes, and then the GIFSKI does this, setting it up so you can see it in a GIF or GIF format. Okay, so so notice this is just the same as the plot stuff we did before. I'm saving it as an object. So here P is the object that I'm using, and the rest is just the same. The labels, three things that are different. These three on the bottom are from the ggAnimate package. Here the thing we are trying to change the plot by, so it's going to animate through something that you put into the plot. So we're doing just the credit limit, the histogram for the credit limit, and you can do this with any type of plot. Well, we're going to go through customers by age. So it's going to start with the lowest age, go to the highest age, and it's going to do a histogram for each age of the credit limit. So transition time is telling it when it goes from one plot to the next, how is it creating that plot? And then here, the curly brackets, frame underscore time, that stays the same for whatever you want to put in there, and this is going to tell you what this transition time variable is when it goes to create the new plot. Then this ease AES just tells it how to smooth transition between the different plots. All right, so then once we can run this, notice it takes, well, I guess I've already ran it so it goes fast. Sometimes it can take a little bit depending on how many of these transition time levels we have. So if instead of custom range we had something that had a whole bunch of variation, then that could be a larger number and it'd take a little bit longer. And then animate tells it, okay, now let's go ahead and create this plot. We have to tell it what the plot object is. And then these are inputs you can mess around with to just say what the plot should look like. How long should each frame last? How many frames per second? The width and the height of that graph. Those just see how they look. This render equals GIFSKI render. This uses the GIFSKI package and just tells you this is how it's going to animate it. So we run this. Takes a minute. You can look at it over here, or you can click on this, show it out into a internet browser. I think it's a little bit easier to look at here. But notice it's going up here where we had the age in the title. It's going up in age from the youngest age to the highest age. And it's really just plotting this graph, each graph, but just animating it for us. So what can we learn from this? Well, when it gets to the lowest, notice we have a small number here over at the left. So a small number that have low credit limits when it's the youngest, and it kind of grows from there. So we start here, and then we start getting more in the low credit limits, and we start getting those that appear out at these higher credit limits. So over time, there are more customers getting, in age, I guess, as the age gets older, we get more customers with low credit limits, and then we start to get customers that have higher credit limits as well. So an interesting way there, Lots of different things we can do with this animated sort of graph. There are other things we can do with other graphs. Like I said, there are lots of different graphing options. The most important part of this graphing is finding one that will work and tell you something about the data. On the homework, I'm going to give you a different data set to see what you can learn about that data. All right?